Uncle Lou, live for you on LouTube today. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that, as well, and all that stuff too. All right, part 4 today in this series that we've been doing this past week on which 3 teams from all 5 of the major conferences legitimately have a shot to make it to the college football playoffs in 2018. I'll put the links up here for the other 3 videos that I've already done, which was on the Big 12, Pac-12, and Big 10. So if you haven't seen any of those 3 videos and you're interested and you want to see those, click the links up there and check them out, and then you can come back and watch this one. But the ACC today, and you know what we're doing by now, but I'm forcing myself to pick 3 and only 3 teams from each of the 5 major conferences that I think can legitimately make a case this offseason for having expectations to make the college football playoff in 2018. Now, there are certain conferences that might have more than 3, 4, 5 even teams that maybe can legitimately make this case. There may be some conferences that only have 1 or 2 that can legitimately make this case. But I'm forcing myself, like I said, to pick 3 and only 3 from each of the 5 major conferences, ACC up right now. Okay, if you're going to start in the ACC talking about college football playoff predictions, teams that want to get there, think they can get there, have a shot to get there for 2018, then there's really only one team you can start with here. The ACC has a clear-cut favorite for 2018. Of course, I'm talking about the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. I'm just bullshit. Georgia Tech hasn't been responsible for anything that anybody remembers in the last, I don't know, 40 years or so, other than the Challenger explosion and the bridge collapse on 85 in Atlanta last year. But no, seriously though, you have to start with the Clemson Tigers. Almost said Taters. Clemson Tigers, clear-cut favorite in 2018, consistently have made the college football playoffs the last few years. Going to be a favorite to make it again this year coming out of the ACC. They return an embarrassment of talent, really, especially their defensive front 7. It's unfair almost. You could make the case, and it would be hard to argue against it, that Clemson's going to have the best front 7 in America, and their defensive backfield is no joke either. Not quite as elite as their front 7. Their front 7 could be an NFL team almost. Offensively, they've got a lot of weapons on the outside, good running backs, proven running backs. They do have a returning starter at quarterback in Kelly Bryant, but of course they bring in one of the most highly touted and highly ranked pocket passing quarterbacks out of high school of the last 10 or 15 years or so in Trevor Lawrence. If you guys have been following me for a while, you know I'm a huge believer in Trevor Lawrence. I think this guy is the real deal in terms of a pro-style pocket passer. He's one of the best I've ever seen coming out of high school, and I'm not the only one that feels that way. Another thing you know about me, if you followed me especially last year, is that I'm not very big on Kelly Bryant. He seems to be, to me, more of a game manager type quarterback, sort of a philosophy that Nick Saban in Alabama has used with a lot of success over his run at Alabama in the last 10 years. I just don't think Clemson can get where they want to go with Kelly Bryant at quarterback. Can they go 12-0 in the regular season and win the ACC with Kelly Bryant? Probably. They almost did it last year. Unexplainable loss to Syracuse. And actually, Kelly Bryant went down in that game, and they had to bring a backup in. That was their only regular season loss, where they finished 11-1, blew Miami out in the ACC title game, but then just got ran over by Alabama in the first round of the playoffs. But Clemson is loaded. Regardless of who they decide to go with at quarterback, whether it be Kelly Bryant or Trevor Lawrence, I expect Clemson to win the ACC and make the college football playoff this year. If I'm a Clemson Tater fan, I'm hoping that Trevor Lawrence develops during this offseason enough to the point where Dabo Swinney is comfortable starting him. I just feel like Clemson's ceiling is higher with a ready Trevor Lawrence than it is with a returning Kelly Bryant. But like I said, whichever way they decide to go, you have to put Clemson on this list. Number 2 on this list of ACC teams that I think legitimately have a shot, or whose fans can legitimately expect to try to make the college football playoff this coming up season in 2018. the Miami Hurricanes. Now remember, these aren't teams I'm predicting to make the playoffs or that I think will make the playoffs. I'm forcing myself to come up with 3 teams here. Miami won their division last year for the first time ever since they've been in the ACC. Like I mentioned, showed up in Charlotte. Actually didn't show up in Charlotte, though, and just got absolutely mollywopped by Clemson in the ACC title game. They also had an unexplainable loss in the regular season to Pittsburgh. This is something that Mark Richt has made a habit of over the last 10 or 15 years, going back to his time at Georgia. Some of the best years Mark Richt ever had at Georgia. Some of his 11-2, 12-2, 13-1 type seasons at Georgia. We blew out some pretty good competition, or beat some pretty good competition, but it seems like we always lost some unexplainable game to a 500 South Carolina team or something like that. Miami Hurricanes experienced that for themselves last year with that Pitt loss. Miami's another team that's loaded right now with a lot of talent and pretty good coaching. Their linebacker core, Miami, is probably the best in the ACC for sure. I would actually take Miami's linebackers over Clemson's linebackers. Now, as a unit, I would take Clemson's front 7 over Miami's front 7, but just purely linebackers, I think Miami has one of the best linebacking groups in the nation. They also have some question marks at quarterback. They return Malik Rozier. I don't think he impressed anybody last year, completed only about 54% of his passes, and really just didn't show up when he needed to. Third downs, they were terrible. I think they were worst in the ACC on third down, something like 29%. He's just not he's not an elite passer ever, but when you get him in a situation where they have to pass, that's when his deficiencies really show. He wasn't really able to pick up key first downs when he needed to. Things like that cost Miami last year. A lot of close games last year from Miami against really bad teams. North Carolina, Georgia Tech, even Florida State. They sort of escaped that Florida State game with a win. Another calling card for Coach Mark Richt, barely beating teams that you should be destroying. You saw that all last year with the Miami Hurricanes. But with that being said, I do think they're the cream of the crop in their division again this year. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they ended up in the ACC championship game. And if they can have a good regular season, 12-0, 11-1, then they're playing for a spot in the college football playoff in the ACC championship game this year. So I put them on my list also in this list of 3. Now, number 3, a little bit more difficult, and I'll just be honest with you, I narrowed this down in my mind to 2 teams. Okay? And the 2 teams I narrowed this third spot down to were the Florida State Seminoles and the Virginia Tech Hokies. Let's start with Florida State. Why did I consider them for this 3-team list of playoff contenders? Outside of Clemson, Florida is probably on paper, Florida State, is probably on paper the second most talented team in the ACC. The problem is they completely did not play like that last year. Yes, I know DeAndre Francois went down in the first game against Alabama, and they brought that guy in from the Sally Struthers commercials. It looks like he hasn't eaten since he was 9 years old. The guy can't weigh but more than maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. Anyway, so I considered Florida State. They lose, I think, 9 starters off their defense, which is what carried them to 7 wins last year. The offense was terrible, one of the worst offensive lines in the ACC. What are they going to do with their quarterback situation? Are they going to go with Francois? I think they probably will if he's healthy. We'll see. They've got great running backs, but their offensive line is terrible. They're going to have talent on defense, but replacing 9 starters, not easy to do. The other team I considered was Virginia Tech, the Hokies. Virginia Tech, to me, is similar to Texas in the Big 12. And what I mean by that is, another thing here that you're going to know if you've been following Uncle Lou for a while, I'm really, really high on Tom Herman and what he has the potential to do at Texas. And when Virginia Tech hired Justin Fuentes, I felt the same way about him. I really, really like Justin Fuentes as a head coach. He's been at Virginia Tech a couple of years now. I knew it was going to take him a while to sort of get it going there. He had to get some players in there that fit the scheme and the things like that he wants to run. But he's had that amount of time now, and really it's put up or shut up time, in my opinion, for Justin Fuentes and Virginia Tech in the ACC. They need to win a division title at some point, in my opinion. Can they do it this year? We'll find out. They've got some playmakers on offense. They lose some playmakers on defense. Both lines of scrimmage, kind of a question mark for Virginia Tech. We'll see what they can do. Of course, it's Miami and Virginia Tech right on the same side of the conference in the ACC. And then Clemson and Florida State, is that right? Also on the same side? I think I have that right. Why is that out of focus now? It's irritating me now. About to get irritated. Don't irritate me. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. Anyway, so those were the two teams I considered for the third spot, Virginia Tech and Florida State. I'm going to go with, for my third pick, Virginia Tech. The reason I'm giving them the nod over Florida State, yes, I think Florida State is probably a more talented team than Virginia Tech. However, it's very difficult to bring in a new coaching staff, particularly after you had a terrible year, and really play at a high elite level. Players are having to learn new terminology, new plays. They're getting to know the coaching staff, that sort of thing. Fuentes been there a couple of years, been a head coach a lot longer than that. So that was sort of the tiebreaker for me in choosing Virginia Tech over Florida State for the third potential team that could expect to make the college football playoffs out of the ACC. The other reason is I think Virginia Tech has a better chance of winning that side of the conference versus Miami than I do think that Florida State could possibly win their side of the conference over Clemson. Clemson, to me, is as close as to a lock for winning their division as you can find in all of college football this year. To me, the biggest disappointment of any team not winning their division this year, looking at all the different conferences and the alignments within the divisions, Clemson would be the biggest disappointment to me if they didn't win their division. I find it impossible to foresee a scenario in which Clemson does not win their side of the division in the ACC this year. I've been wrong before, but I don't expect to be wrong in this particular situation here. Anyway, there it is. My three teams for the ACC 2018. UNCLELOU's three teams that I think can legitimately expect, or whose fans could hope for a playoff spot in 2018. The Clemson Tigers, the Miami Hurricanes, and the Virginia Tech Hokies. Have a great day!